What are they doing there? Dozens of giant humanoid statues, stone jars in a remote Indonesian valley, carved from a rock that doesn't exist in that valley. Archaeologists haven't found the tools used to shape them or evidence of settlements from their creators. Today we're taking you to the Bada Valley, a place that presents an impossible enigma. Extraordinary monuments with no apparent builder that force us to wonder if their origin should be sought in a history much older and more mysterious than we've ever dared to imagine. But before we set off on this fascinating journey, as always, we invite you to subscribe to the channel to support our work and to make sure you don't miss the upcoming episodes. The Bada Valley was discovered by Europeans in 1908 when the ethnographer and missionary Albert Crute began documenting the statues and vases found throughout the valley. Local communities believe these monuments were part of their history, built by ancestors whose memory had long been lost. Some legends say the statues guarded the village and received sacrifices for prosperity and good harvests. There are now over 400 megalithic artifacts scattered in the Bada, Besoa, and Napu valleys. Among these, there are about 400 huge cylindrical jars known as Kalamba and 30 statues with humanoid features called Arca. These megaliths are so different from each other, yet they seem to share a common mysterious origin. Kalamba are large stone jars, 1 to 2 meters in diameter, with massive lids. Their exact purpose remains unknown, but some theories suggest that they were used as funerary urns. However, many of the Kalamba are too shallow to contain a body, which raises doubts about their function. Most likely they have little to do with funeral rites, but these vessels must have been intended for a very complex use that we are not able to fully understand today. The Arca, on the other hand, are humanoid statues between 1 and 4 meters tall. The main features of the Arca are their oversized heads and bodies without legs. Some of the statues depict pregnant female figures, suggesting that they might have had a role related to fertility. Who were these figures, and why are they both so stylized and evocative? Among the most fascinating statues of the Bada Valley is Palindo, which in the local language means the entertainer. Palindo stands over 4 meters tall and is one of the best preserved statues in the valley. According to local tradition, Palindo had the task of entertaining or protecting the community and was often involved in ritual ceremonies. His large head and enigmatic expression seem almost as if they want to communicate with those who observe him, leaving room for countless interpretations. Adding further to the mystery is the rock with which this incredible artifact is made, a material that comes from a type of stone that is not found in the valley. So who brought it to the site, how they did it, and in what era remains a real mystery that opens the door to less orthodox theories. According to the official dating by archaeologists, the statues of the Bada Valley date back to a period between 1,000 and 5,000 years ago. However, there is a question as to whether this estimate is truly accurate. They could be much older than what official science suggests. As we'll see, their history is lost in an even more mysterious past. Humans settled in Southeast Asia 55,000 to 65,000 years ago. Just think that until about 15,000 years ago, the sea level was about 125 meters lower than it is today. This means that what is now 60 meters below the Java Sea was, at that time, part of a vast landmass called Sunda Land. This land connected the Malay Peninsula, Sumatra, Java, and Borneo, and on the other side, you could easily reach Sulawesi and the Philippines by boat. During much of the last ice age, from 110,000 to 15,000 years ago, this vast landmass was exposed, making it possible for humans to move by land and sea toward new horizons. The first humans likely arrived in Sulawesi between 50,000 and 30,000 years ago. But around 19,000 years ago, when the last glacial maximum ended, everything changed dramatically. The climate warmed up and the seas began to rise, submerging huge portions of land. There were at least 3 main episodes when the sea level rose more rapidly, about 14,500, 11,500, and 7,500 years ago. It was during this period that Sulawesi became a true island, separated from the rest of Southeast Asia, thus isolating the cultures that had already settled there. The arrival of the Austronesian groups took place at a time when the sea level was already similar to what it is today. Thanks to advanced ocean navigation technologies, these peoples were able to travel to islands visible on the horizon. Yet the mysterious megaliths that we can admire today in Sulawesi date back to an even more ancient era, bearing witness to a deeply rooted civilization full of secrets still waiting to be discovered. Who were the mysterious people who built these astonishing megaliths? A clue comes from the other side of the world, specifically from Turkey. We're talking about Göbekli Tepe, one of the oldest megalithic sites ever discovered. Göbekli Tepe is about 11,500 years old, predating Stonehenge and Egypt's pyramids. This site is made up of a series of megalithic pillars arranged in a circle, many of which feature carvings depicting animals and enigmatic symbols. The statues of Göbekli Tepe are stylized figures, often featuring symbolic details, showing hands and arms in specific positions with the hands resting on the abdomen. This posture, very similar to the one observed in the statues of the Bada Valley, seems to suggest a symbolic connection between the two sites. Both places share the depiction of hands, emphasis on specific anatomical parts, and figure stylization, separated by thousands of kilometers and seemingly different eras. So we might ask ourselves, could the statues of the Bada Valley be the same age as those of Göbekli Tepe? Is it possible that both these cultures, although distant in space and time, shared common knowledge, or that the civilization that carved them was much older than previously believed? As we've seen, Göbekli Tepe dates back to a period much earlier than that of the Bada Valley civilization, a time just after the last ice age, when Earth's geography was very different. But that's not all. Official history still does not recognize any civilization advanced enough to make such artifacts. The statues of the Bada Valley show similarities not only with Göbekli Tepe, but also with other megalithic monuments around the world, such as the statues of San Agustin in Colombia and the famous Moai of Easter Island. The statues' hand posture and shape hint at a possible cultural link, or at least a striking coincidence, between these distant civilizations. The Moai of Easter Island, for example, are known for their large heads and stylized bodies, and their purpose remains largely shrouded in mystery. Similarly, the statues of San Agustin depict human and animal figures in ritual poses, suggesting a culture deeply connected to symbolism and the sacred. But which ancient civilization was advanced enough to create these works and also engage in cultural exchanges with people worldwide? However, the mysteries of the Bada Valley do not end here. As we mentioned earlier, there are megaliths that seem to appear as enormous stone jars, and they are just as mysterious. These gigantic stone jars are actually carved from a type of rock that is not found in the area. So it is assumed that the material used to make them was transported from a more distant location. This raises further questions about the logistics involved in their construction and transportation. How would the ancient inhabitants have moved these enormous stones as we have seen? The most common hypothesis about their function is that the Kalamba were used as collective funerary urns, an idea supported by the fact that some of the jars were found with massive lids. But in reality, not all Kalamba are deep enough to contain bodies, and some have internal divisions that do not fit funeral use. They may have served ritual purposes or held sacred water, but for now, we can only hypothesize about their use as we lack a definite explanation. Moreover, it seems very unlikely to imagine that these could have been objects used for funerary purposes, because it's important to point out that no traces of ancient human settlements have been found in the region. The technique used to shape these enormous stones is also mysterious, and it's inevitable to wonder what tools were used to carve them. But that's not all. We don't know because no trace of them has been found. But it's also hard to understand how a primitive people who didn't know the harder metals could have done it. The fact that no tools have been found and that there are no human settlements has led to the hypothesis that these megaliths were made elsewhere and only later transported to these areas by an ancient people. Moreover, they did not establish their own settlement in the region because, as we said, no traces of human settlements have been found. To all this, we must add the rugged nature of the territory where these artifacts are located, which makes their transportation even more mysterious and almost miraculous for a primitive people. In summary, the creators of the Bada Valley artifacts remain unknown. We don't know what they were used for, and we don't even understand how they ended up in these places. The official datings place them in a historical period that raises many doubts, and there are many clues that instead suggest these megaliths were erected in a much more remote time. If historical records and archaeology can explain these incredible artifacts' origin and purpose, what we can try to do is ask the local natives if they know the story of these extraordinary megaliths. What the natives claim is that the statues and the large stone jars have been here since time immemorial, and that they are not the work of human beings as we know them today. Local beliefs suggest something much more fascinating and unsettling. Tradition claims the Bada Valley megaliths are the petrified remains of a cursed lineage, a race of ancient beings condemned to remain petrified for eternity because of their actions. It is said that these creatures dared to challenge higher powers by committing impure acts that led to their transformation into statues, and so they were condemned to dwell in the deep solitude of the jungle. This isn't just an isolated legend. Similar stories of petrified ancient races exist in traditions worldwide. In Andean legends, the god Viracocha is said to have turned ancient giants into stone because of their abominable behavior. In local legends and many world traditions, the term now translated as ancestors refers to more than just deceased forebears, suggesting something deeper and more mysterious. Esoterically, these ancestors, literally those born before, suggest a pre-human, antediluvian civilization that existed before our era and has vanished. According to these beliefs, the ancestors would not simply be human progenitors, but a forgotten lineage, a race that preceded ours, which has left silent traces. Through these megaliths, still very much alive in folk traditions, it is therefore possible that these megaliths are the last tangible evidence of a very ancient and now vanished civilization. It could be that these antediluvian cultures had advanced knowledge that escapes us today and that they left traces of their existence in remote places like the Bada Valley. The mysteries grow, even as mainstream science dismisses such radical ideas. We cannot ignore the power of oral traditions and myths that survive in the folk tales of these regions and many others around the world. At this point, we are really curious to know your opinion. Write in the comments what you think about it. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support our work. See you in the next story.